Sawadee Krap and welcome to another episode here for the Funkit Pod, Mindful Media and Communication. And in this episode, it was really tough to not start with Keisha's super hit. And you already know why, because you saw the headline or the thumbnail or whatever made you click here, right? So let's jump right into it because, well, we're talking about TikTok, obviously, right? And TikTok's been in the news as of late, and so I figure it makes sense to just quickly analyze a little bit, like, why is TikTok always in the news when it comes to, I know, privacy issues, being sued and whatnot. So I'm kind of like waltzing through that dance app, or that app that became famous thanks to all those dances back then. Gonna like try to navigate this pretty complex web of data privacy, and we're gonna try to have like this quick pit stop at like the global stage of what can you do in different countries, for example, from Europe to Thailand, where I'm based right now, and beyond, of course. So let's jump into TikTok's dance with controversy, if you will. Okay, so TikTok is of course synonymous with like catchy tunes, viral challenges, and yes, those never-ending loops. It just never stops, right? Like, yet beneath this exterior, right, there's a kind of like a whirlwind romance, if you will, with controversy. Like, there are allegations around user data ending up in pretty questionable databases. There's Europe's GDPR that's been raising eyebrows, and even more red flags, if you will. Okay. If you're a TikTok user, if you recall your first time setting up your account, right? So the permissions that it asks for, it said that it's for some users that it wasn't just their dance move that's got exposure, but probably even more, right? Just picture this. Like, teenagers all across Europe, right, doing their viral dances, and all while being oblivious to where their data actually spins off to, right? So the concern isn't just about what TikTok knows, but about what it does with what it knows, and who else gets to know that. So that's more or less the issue, okay? And yeah, different countries, different regulations, of course, right? So in Europe, there's the GDPR. Here in Thailand, we have the PDPA. The US, they have lots of different stuff. So we gotta figure out where's the beef. And right now, as of recording, 2023, right now, TikTok's got major beef in Europe. And why? Because the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, is this like Europe's guardian of the galaxy, if you will, of the digital galaxy. It's designed to ensure that companies treat our data with the respect that it deserves. Okay, it's like a yardstick by which many global regulations are measured, actually. Okay. In contrary, I know, besides that, here in Thailand, for example, we have the PDPA. The PDPA took inspiration from the GDPR and tried to merge best practices, I want to say, with like localized requirements here in Thailand. So yeah, if you want, you look at like those buzzing streets of Bangkok, and there's street food vendors accepting digital payments, and you can scan QR codes to pay, right? To like all the high-end and malls here with facial recognition, if you will. The PDPA tries to ensure like the digital respect isn't just lost in translation, so to speak. Now, if it's enforced, it's a different question, okay? In the US, but like the US is just so completely different, right? And it plays to a different tune, and more in just a second. So there are states like California, for example. They have similar-ish regulations that are leaning towards the GDPR, I want to say. But there's lots of diversity in the US, right? If you ask someone from Texas or from New York, they probably have different takes on what data you can use and store and pass on and so on. Okay. The major difference, I want to say, between Europe and the US, for example, would be that Europe really focuses on privacy first of the user, of the citizens, while in the US it's more like if you tell the user, hey, we're going to use your data, it's fair game. And I simplify, of course, right? But there are like more economic benefits over maybe individual benefits, because I told you I'm going to use your data, so you can't complain. While in Europe, the reasons why you collect data must be very clear. Otherwise, you're going to get sued. And that's what's happening to TikTok right now. But more on this in just a second. Okay. So two major points of view are in regards to how to use data or how to store data is how to utilize and handle privacy with your app, in this case TikTok, right? So there are two different major approaches. One is privacy by default, it's a setting. The other one is privacy by design, that's also a setting. Okay, so now you have to figure out, okay, what we're gonna do with our company, our app. Do we go for privacy by design or privacy by default? So if you remember that the time you open up an app and it seemed to know, well, a bit too much about you, right? That's the clash between privacy by default, where user data protection is baked right into the app, basically, and the unfortunate reality many of us actually face. So let's dive into the more like harmonious, I want to say version. Okay, so privacy by design. It's a world where like every digital step, every pixelated leap, if you will, respects user data, right? Everything you click, everything you do is data. Okay. It's like constructing a house based on like different bricks of data, right? Instead of adding locks after building it, like imagine you just integrate security into every single brick, every window, like just from the get-go, from the outset. Okay. And now the question is, if you just look at your phone right now, right? Like how many apps in your phone actually honor your privacy? How often are we, if you're honest, lured in by the convenience of an app, like overlooking the liberties it actually takes with your data? Why do random apps ask you for access to your Bluetooth, for example? Like you don't even need it, And isn't it like curious that like after a simple chat about maybe a restaurant, ads for similar eateries start popping up everywhere? Coincidence? So it's difficult. And I don't just want to hate on TikTok here, of course, because other apps are doing similar things. TikTok is just like the big, I don't want to say fall guy, because it's not falling, but just like make an example out of it. Just because it's like this big company that's based in China. I'm pretty certain that other companies are doing similar things, right? But let's stick to this case for a second. So right now, TikTok, again, being scrutinized, especially in Europe, and being sued in Europe because of the privacy issues, right? So it's saying, well, and it's mostly in regards to also children's, for example, right? It's also in regards to how it treats children, what children can do when they sign up, and so on. But more on this, like I said, in just a little bit. I wanna like talk about a few implications, and then I'm gonna break it down into more detail. Okay, so if you like in this world in that we're in right now, right? There's this world of like endless scrolling, if you will, and endless clicking, and so on. Like this digital tapestry is like pretty rich, right? Pretty varied, like lots of different content. Yet each click is kind of like a breadcrumb, right? That leads to your preferences, what you like. If you stop on a video, for example, that's data, right? It shows more about your life, about what you like. And there's a paradox in all of that, right? In a bid to like become more connected with everything, everyone, all the time, we have inadvertently surrendered like our digital autonomy, if you will. And isn't that like just a tad, just several tads creepy when like an online ad eerily mirrors like a recent conversation? It freaks me out. So I think a thought to consider here is like that the data realm isn't really that different from the wild. Okay, just as every forest has its like guardians and predators, the digital woods have regulations and hackers. I'm not saying TikTok is a hacker, but the question remains like just how well do you navigate those woods? Okay. But like I said, I want to go into a bit more detail, okay? If you talk about like the GDPR, the PDPA, and whatnot. So again, like backing up to like this GDPR like, what's Europe really about? Okay, so in Europe, the GDPR is like, and if you're like from the US, you're gonna hate me for it. It's like this knight in shining armor. Okay, why? Wait. Just let me explain. Yeah, so it again, it originates from the EU, and it's like pretty stringent like regulation about more than just checkboxes and user agreements and yes, pop up and so on. Yeah, fines under the GDPR, they can reach up to millions in the Rock's voice, and millions of euros every year. Okay. So next time the cookie notification pops up, yeah, you know why? Because if the website doesn't do that, they could get sued. Okay, so that's why European websites, for example, need to be like very, very careful with like communicating how they use your data, what kind of data they're using, and so on. Okay. Also, what's interesting, I think that the GDPR brought to light what we call the right to be forgotten. Okay, it's like also like a law, so to speak. So if you ever wanted to erase something from the internet, like that information about you, the GDPR might be that genie that can fulfill that wish. Okay. It really depends on like what kind of data. So if you kill someone, that data will not be erased, for example. But if there's something that there's no reason for it being stored, then you can request data controllers, the company that stores data, to delete it. It could be Google, that could be whatever website you've been on, for example, right? So if you delete your account, then there's a rule that says after a certain amount of time, they have to delete the data too, unless it needs to be stored for something, whatever. Okay, and that's pretty stringent in the EU, right? So the reason why a company stores your data is pretty strict in the EU, while in the US, it might not be as strict. That's also one reason why TikTok is in trouble right now, because the EU says, once you don't need that data anymore to provide your service, you have to delete it. And now, of course, companies argue, yeah, but maybe we need this data again, or maybe we still need it. But the EU says, no, that user deleted their account, you don't need the data, delete the data, just as an example. Okay, so this is one of the arguments that the EU has with TikTok, for example. Okay. Also, like how to transfer data is like another point. Okay. It's a pretty hot topic actually, like how to transfer data. There's like a ruling called Schrems 2. Like the data flow between, for example, Europe and the US is like very much scrutinized right now, right? So because it's just important to have like those safe havens for data, so to speak. So you cannot just send any data from country A to country B, for example. You would assume, yeah, why not? It's easier, right? The internet. So, but you need to, if you, for example, even if your company is based in the US, but you operate in Europe, you have to comply with the GDPR, for example. So those rules are pretty strict, pretty important. And like I said earlier, Thailand tried to copy that to some extent and says, okay, we're going to start the PDPA, the Privacy Data Protection Act. But it got a bit of a unique flair. Right? So it's like, it tries to emphasize more Asian cultural values, if you will. So it's about like privacy as well, but also like this communal harmony, if you will. Yeah, so it's, how do I do this? Yeah, let's imagine Thai silk, because it's very intricate. Oh, that's a smart metaphor here. I'm very proud of that right now. The PDPA try to weave, see what I'm doing here, like this protective net when it comes to sensitive data. Yeah, for example, for health, race, biometrics, and so on. It commenced in 2022 and 2020, but the enforcement is still no comment. And when we talk about the US, what I did earlier, right? In the US, it's really like a patchwork thing, because the different states have different rules. Like California, as I said earlier, they have like let me see if I wrote it down, the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, which is inspired-ish by the GDPR, I want to say. So they can opt out of like how the data is collected and so on. But states like New York or Washington have like other acts, right, that could be similar, but just a different name. So it's very much a state thing, which leads to this patchwork I don't know, this patchwork piece of law, regulations, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, if you look in other countries, like just for example, Brazil has I forgot to write it down, it's the LGPD, if I'm not mistaken. It's just based on similar principles to the GDPR, but it's of course more towards like Brazilian realities. And so, and India has the draft of I think it's just called DPP, Data Protection Bill, which tries to echo like both like the GDPR, but also the unique demographic needs in India, of course, because India is so big. Even like different African countries have regulations. There's the African, and I wrote this one down, the African Union's Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, which also set standards across the whole continent, for example. So you see everybody's trying to work on it. But we're not here to talk about everybody, we're here to talk about TikTok. And so I'm bringing this back to TikTok now, okay? And then wrapping things up. So those privacy concerns again, right? Which I said earlier. So the question is, how does it store data? And how does it process the data, okay? And the parent company of TikTok, ByteDance, for example, was back then already accused of collecting data without actually asking for consent, which I talked about earlier. Yeah, it's a scenario similar to many platforms, but since TikTok has become so popular, lots of people now paying attention. Okay. So Europe's response to all of that is like, hey, yeah, we got the GDPR here, like the knight in shining armor, how I just call it. So Europe is like, hey, knight, go fight TikTok. So now GDPR riding into battle. And because GDPR, Europe is so vigilant about it, TikTok is now under heavy scrutiny, okay? So now regulators, they began probing the platform, whether or not it's compliant with European data protection laws. And I wrote this one down too, that's why I have to look at my script. The European Data Protection Board, EDPB, they had a task force that was actually like looking into this whole thing, okay? Now, TikTok says, on the other hand, all the stuff that you found has been years old, and we already changed it. We already made changes to comply with the GDPR, and now there's a huge back and forth. Okay. What's going to happen now is another question, right? So what's next, basically, and yeah, who knows? I don't think that TikTok is going to go under or anything, because it's way too big to fail. Also, other companies probably doing similar things. Maybe they're just smarter at it, or maybe they do actually comply with European laws, while TikTok has taken some liberties there. Who knows? It's just very interesting. And it's not just TikTok that's being sued, by the way. Google is being sued in Europe all the time. Like Germany, where I'm from, is like one of the countries that just keeps suing Google all the time for privacy infringements and privacy issues and whatnot, and IP tracking and what you name it, we sue them for it. Okay. So I'm not a big fan of course, always suing everybody, but in this case, I think just holding big companies responsible, and especially when it comes to data, because I mean, you've seen those creepy ads and so on. It feels like this guy from You stalking you. I think it's maybe not a bad idea to ask for accountability for those companies, at least as much as you can. So yeah, I leave it at that, because again, predictions hard to make. I am predicting TikTok isn't going anywhere. I'm predicting TikTok's going to pay a fine. That's going to be that. I don't think the fine is going to be as high as they indicate right now, because they're going to have a point in saying, hey, we already adapted to lots of the GDPR stuff that you just found by probing like us on standards from 2020. By using, they're going to pay a fine, so that Europe can say, look, they paid a fine. We fined them hard, probably the highest fine ever or something, but not as much as they want. And then we're going to move on. That's my prediction. Okay, having that said, yeah, let me know what you think. What do you care about data, about privacy? Or do you care about like what apps do with your stuff? Or are you like, whatever, as long as it's free, I don't care. I have nothing to hide. That's like the knockout argument people always make. I have nothing to hide. You can collect my data. Yeah, cool. But I mean, do you just want the creepy companies following you around? Let me know in the comments. Let me know social media at funkitpod, email funkitpod@gmail.com. As always, like, share, subscribe, leave some reviews. That would be awesome. And yeah, we'll see each other on TikTok. Until then, take care, stay safe. Sorry, Cup.